Yo, what's going on, everyone? Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we're reviewing another one that was very popularly requested, Jim.
Yeah, surprisingly requested. I didn't even know that this had come out.
Yeah, we never played it before deciding to do all these Resident Evil games. So we're, of course, talking about Resident Evil Revelations 2. A highly anticipated sequel to what we think is a very underrated original game.
Yeah, I mean, we loved the hell out of the first Revelations, so does this hold up? We're going to find out.
Goddamn better.
It better. Or else I'll do nothing about it because I got to keep it on myself and stuff.
Jim, can I break it?
No.
Let me break your collection.
No, buy your own and break it.
Damn it.
Released in 2015, this came out on the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Windows, the 360, the Xbox One, the Vita, and eventually the Switch. So this was released episodically, and it basically came out with a new episode every week. So between February 24th and March 17th, you would get different releases for all these episodes. And, I mean, it's kind of cool, but we didn't play it until 2019, and we bought the physical collection with all of them in one thing, so whatever. It was developed and published by Capcom. It's the second game in the Revelations side series of games. It takes place between Resident Evil 5 and 6, which, oof, for hardcore fans of the series, I'm sure that's good news. And yeah, I haven't really heard about a Resident Evil Revelations game since then, so might tell you something.
But Jim, talk about Kafka.
Oh, we're going to talk about Kafka. Actually, you're going to talk about Kafka. Alright, the graphics. This is a weird one because there's a lot of highs but some really bad lows when it comes to this. So we like the creature designs in this game a lot. The main enemies in this game are known as the Afflicted, at least early on. And it's kind of a weird blending of the creatures from Outlast with Toxie from the Toxic Avenger. Because you just get these weird, like, mangled creatures with all these, horror and metal cages and shit all poking out of their body and around their heads, but you also get the weird puffy bubbliness. It's weird. Some of the set pieces in the game look pretty cool, and it really tries to go for that darker, grittier look, and it kind of almost gets you right back to that classic Resident Evil kind of feel, where some of the things can build some actual tension because of the lack of really being able to see not only what's going on, but stuff coming from behind the corners, different booby traps. And it has some nice parts with some decent lighting and some decent weather effects-ish, but it kind of misses the mark, and where it really misses the mark is just the quality of the graphics. This game looks like crap. This game looks worse than Resident Evil 6, and that came out 3 years before on way weaker hardware. I just don't know how, the texture mapping's so bad in this game. The character designs are okay, but for this generation, it's painfully average, if anything. And the cutscenes don't even look that good. They didn't even step it up for that. And then it's just the game's weirdly choppy. So besides looking like crap, it's weirdly choppy with an almost variable frame rate depending on what's going on. And it isn't in the fact that it really speeds up or slows down, but there's nothing smooth about it. And whatever it was, whether it was the choppiness, the motion blur they used, or the combination of all of it, but if you get motion sick, you will get sick as a dog playing this like I did. I could barely play through much of this game at all, so that's why Brian's going to handle the heavy load of this review, because I'd play for an hour and then I'd have to lay down for the rest of the night because I just felt sick to my stomach. So, I don't know what they were doing and how they effed this up this bad, but
Kafka!
You know what? Maybe an intellectual has to appreciate the graphics of this game. So, Brian gave it a 6, and I gave it a 5. And when it comes to beer, I'm going to give it 3 beers. 1 for the choppiness, 1 for the terrible graphics in general, and 1 for... Okay, 1... God, no, not Kafka. 1 happy beer for the kind of cool creature designs. Alright, the sound. I guess the best word to describe the sound in this game is forgettable. So when it comes to the music, it's easily the most forgettable music out of any of these third-person Resident Evil games, and that's kind of saying a lot. It's fine, but Again, you won't even remotely remember or hum anything after you're done playing. The voice acting's okay. It's not bad, doesn't take away from the game. It's perfectly acceptable. It's just, again, kind of forgettable. The creature sounds are pretty cool in the game, though. I'll give it that. And the sound effects in general are, once again, slightly above average. So, I mean, it's not a lot here that we can really kill technically, so that's why we gave it 7s. But you won't remember anything about any of the performances, whether it's the score or the voice acting. So, when it comes to beer, I'm just going to give it one very forgettable beer.
The control's interesting, because as we stated with Resident Evil Revelations, that felt like the best controlling Resident Evil game to date. So we had high hopes that they would just continue that trend. Sure enough, they decided to complicate the shit out of it. Because, God forbid, you keep your strafing and all your button actions really simple. Now, what really ends up making this a little more confusing is, one, now you can switch between your characters at will, so they map one button and give up that. But on top of that, they added a new dodge mechanic, which we did have some problems with that from the original Revelations, but it felt a little unnecessary. They added a healing button and a run button, so yes, there were more things you could do, and it was a more advanced control scheme, but because it complicated it in a game that really shouldn't be that complicated, it felt muddy, and it just was never intuitive. I mean, I picked this up directly after playing Resident Evil Revelations, and I felt like I was playing a completely different game. The shooting, the reloading, yep, that's all the same, but where the buttons were laid out just felt different and very odd. So when it comes to scores, we gave it 7s. It's still fine overall, and especially for a Resident Evil game. It just sucks it followed such a good game with Resident Evil Revelations. And it even came after 6, which might have had its flaws, but that game felt a little more intuitive than this. So when it comes to beer, I'm going to give it at least 2. For one, for complicating the shit out of a control scheme that was so well done, and for following Resident Evil 6 and not doing better on the control. What are you, Jim?
Yeah, what are you, me? Hey, wait a second.
Kafka. The gameplay. Once again, just like Revelations, this is broken down into different episodes, although there's a lot less this time, so you would think you'd have a much more concise story. It's kind of true, kind of not. The best way I can describe it, and I know I made the jokes earlier, is this felt like someone trying to be a little too intellectual for a Resident Evil title, and apparently it's because most of the plot and gameplay was based on some of Frank Kafka's work. Even the names of the episodes are based on some of his short stories, and you can kind of feel it with the overcomplication of what's going on in the game. Your main protagonists are Barry Burton and Claire Redfield, so right away you should think, man, this is going to be awesome. The problem is the characters that play with them, because Claire plays with Moira, who happens to be Barry's daughter. It's not much of a spoiler, you learn right away. And Barry is teaming up with this girl, Natalia, who has some interesting supernatural abilities. What this game chose to do is, instead of having a partner system where you would just split up who does what, since you can keep switching back and forth, they constantly bombard you with things that this character needs to be used now, and then that character. So Claire and Barry are basically the powerhouses. They're the ones that'll shoot and fight the enemies, and the other two are support characters. Moira, for whatever reason, is terrified of guns, and she just hits shit with her crowbar and uses a flashlight to reveal hidden items. And Natalia, as I said, with her supernatural ability, can sense enemies. And this is a really useful skill when you're going up against some of these other creatures where you have to identify their weak area, but it also becomes a little cheap, because she's so weak, you're always going to go back to Barry, and you can kind of make her hide. And those enemies that would have been tough if you had to kind of guess where to shoot are taken out really easily. The only nod I can give to this game as far as an interesting gameplay mechanic is the stealth element actually works out pretty well. If you're crouching and trying to avoid a fight, you can be pretty successful in this game. And the AI is actually dumbed down really well, because when I was Barry in some of these levels, I cleared out whole rooms of enemies with them only being a few feet from each other. Apparently they can't see me knifing and fucking up all their friends. It was really odd choice. Other than that, they did take it into a more of a horror route, but once again, I can't stress enough. it felt too complicated for its own good. You still had the abilities to unlock skills, to upgrade your weapons, so a lot of the things we saw from Revelations, all in all, I really want to like this game, but because they force you to have to keep using those weaker characters, and it makes the levels just drone on a little bit longer than they should, Jim and I couldn't help but give this game 7s. And when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 2. 1 for goddamn Kafka. Got it in there, Jim.
Finally did it.
Just like your mother.
God. Damn it.
And 2, just for the incessant need to continually use those characters that piss you off.
All right, the originality. Ugh. Well, all the secondary characters really do feel different from each other. And the episodic release schedule was unique. Brian, I'm kind of struggling here.
Kafka.
Oh, yeah, the Kafka shit. So, with all that being said, we gave it 4s. So when it comes to beers, I'm going to give it 2 beers. 1 for, I guess, the episodic release schedule, and 2 for being the only Resident Evil game to truly make me sick, and not for the right reasons.
The replayability. Well, this game happens to win some replayability because of a technicality the way we score this game. So right off the bat, you do have multiplayer, which automatically brings it up to a 5. And there are a lot of things that you can find and unlock. And there are 2 bonus episodes called Little Miss and The Struggle that you can play through. But one interesting thing of their replayability is that there are 2 endings in this game. Now, naturally, with Resident Evil games, it's usually about how fast you beat it, how many saves, if you died, yada, yada, yada. That's not how this one works. There is a very particular moment, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who wants to play, but you should probably look it up if you don't want the bad ending, where you make a very specific decision, and it doesn't even seem terribly unique, but that will determine, based on which character you choose to perform a certain action, if you get the good or bad ending. And there is no indication of if you're getting a good or bad ending. So when I finished this game, I was happy as shit to be done, but it turned out I got the bad ending. So buyer beware, I guess. If you really want to get the good ending, maybe just look up a strategy guide and figure out.
Right, why don't you play through it again and get the good one?
I don't think I'll ever play through this game again, Jim.
Oh.
So when it comes to scores, we had to give it 7s. There are reasons to play through this game, just not the right reasons. So when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 2. And honestly, they're both for that cheap-ass way that you have to go through and play the game again. So overall, it kind of shocked the shit out of us how much we didn't enjoy this game. And that's not to say there aren't good parts of it, but it definitely just wasn't for Jim and I.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened with this one.
Kafka.
Goddamn Kafka, they outthought themselves. That's what happened. They thought they were smarter than they are, just quoting Kafka left and right, and what happens? Shit game.
Yeah, the thing that really fucked it up for me was, why did you mess with that control scheme? I know you needed to do something with a secondary character to switch over, but why did you switch everything else? The movement and just... That pissed me off the most. And that is the story that made me feel like, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the story's fine, but just everything about it just feels off and wrong.
Yeah.
Which I guess leads it to being our lowest reviewed game
So
of the Resident Evils.
I actually gave it a 7. Jim gave it a 6. I still appreciated some of the horror elements, but yeah, it's definitely just not a stellar game. And Jim, like he said, he couldn't even finish it because he got motion sickness.
I didn't appreciate how goddamn sick it made me.
So, when we round it all together, as Jim said, it came out to a 6.6. We know most people will be like, there's no way this is the lowest rated Resident Evil. And to be fair, it's the lowest rated Resident Evil from the main series, not taking into account like Outbreak and all those other games. But honestly, we felt every other title had something a little bit more memorable. And if we ever go back to play Resident Evil games, this will be the lowest on my list to ever go back and play again.
I'm never touching it again. I'm never finishing it.
Yeah, so...
$15 well spent.
Yeah. Still, if you're a big fan of the series and you want to finally get a chance to play through a main story as Barry Burton, this is your chance.
It's time to shine. In the worst game. Poor guy.
I mean, yeah, he might have... Was he in Gaiden?
He was in Gaiden.
Yeah, but come on. Nobody played that.
Well, no one's paying it now. Paying 180 goddamn bucks for a Game Boy Color game. Get the hell out of here.
So you'll have it next week?
I'm going to have 3.
All right, guys, let us know what you think below. We know this probably disappoints a lot of people, but we would love to hear why you love it so much.
Yeah, and if you hate it, let us know why you're correct in that assumption.
Yeah, make us right.
Please, just watch.
All right, guys, cheers.
Cheers.
When it comes to beer pairing, I decided to go with the Sam Adams 76. Much like this game, for some reason, this feels like a knockoff of the original, which I liked so much more. It's not to say this is a terrible beer, it just doesn't live up to the hype of the original. So grab a 6-pack, sit down, and if you're a hardcore fan of the Resident Evil series, try to enjoy yourself. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.